Okay, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are so excited to be joined today by two of our officers here at Argo. We have Lisa and we have Caroline. Today we're going to be focused fully on talking about F-1 visa refusals and kind of what you need to know to avoid a refusal, but also if you faced a refusal, what you should keep in mind. We'll give it a minute for everybody to kind of join us. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. If you've already been accepted to a university and you've started the journey, we'd love to hear where you plan on attending. And a few housekeeping items is that we will have Q&A at the end of the session. Please just put your question in the chat one time. If you put it numerous times, you're going to have to delete your chats and not answer them, because then nobody else's chats get seen. And so just for keeping it fair for everybody, please just put your question only in the box once. We'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. And doing it just once allows us to work more efficiently through the questions to get to as many as possible. Okay, so with that, would love for you both to introduce yourselves. Some of you probably already seen Lisa on our YouTube channel. For those of you who haven't met Caroline yet, you guys are in for a treat with both of them. So Lisa, do you want to start by introducing yourself to everybody here?
Yeah, so I was a former visa officer. I was with the US State Department for nearly 15 years. I served in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Iraq, France, and in Washington, D.C. When I was serving in D.C. was actually as a legal advisor to our other visa officers serving at embassies around the world. So helping them, ensure they're interpreting and applying visa laws and regulations correctly. I've been consulting with Argo Visa for, I think, 6 years now. Helped over 1,000 visa clients, and super happy to be here and to be chatting with yourself and Caroline.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. So Caroline, do you want to introduce yourselves to our audience today?
Sorry, a little problem there with mute. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to meet you. Hi, Lisa Davis. I'm looking forward to our chat with everybody. I was a Foreign Service Officer, Consular Affairs for over 15 years. My whole career was in consular affairs. I have worked, at lots of different places between temporary duty and, to name a few, Philippines, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Washington, D.C. So like Lisa, I've had a varied background. So you're getting the best of both worlds from us. I have also officially trained officers for many years. I was a trainer, training consular officers on the windows. I spent a lot of time with new officers. And so just mainly when working with new officers, you learn lots of things. So when most of you go to the window, the officers you will be seeing are pretty new officers. And I also have joined Argo. I just recently retired from the service in September, and I'm delighted to be a part of the team with Argo. So looking forward to all your questions and spending some time with you.
Uh-oh, I think Davis might be frozen.
Oh no, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So anyways, thanks everybody for joining, and thanks Lisa and Caroline for being here. Just wanted to remind everybody before we officially really get rolling, please only put your questions once in the chat. This is going to make it a better experience for everybody. So let's get started and just frame what we're talking about today, which is refusals. I mean, what are the most common types of refusals that a visa applicant may see at the window, specifically a student visa applicant? What do you think, Caroline?
Oh, first ball out to me. Great. Well, F1s, as you know, are, very competitive right now. Last year had a high refusal rate, believe, and Lisa, please correct me if I'm wrong. We had a high refusal rate, I think around about 44%. So the very first advice I give to you is bring your A game to the window. You need to be fully on at the window. The most, during my time as an officer and also working with Argo, The most that I have seen that's caused me concern for people when they go to the window is they're unable to talk about the school they're going to. They're unable to talk about the curriculum. You know, as a visa officer, I want to hear why you want to go to that school. Quite often I've heard, I really like the weather of the campus and I've lots of friends there, you know, which is great. And, you know, that's really good that plays in. But what a visa officer wants to know within 3 to 4 minutes, because that's usually as long as you have, if you get that long, is why do you want to go to that school? What's the purpose? What's attracted you? If you're an older student, how does your work experience figure into going to that school? So be really knowledgeable about your school. As an officer, and I'm sure Lisa's done the same thing, I might say, what's the subject that attracts you the most? So know your school, know it inside out. Rankings, you know, rankings don't mean an awful lot to an officer. Either does the professors. We want to know why you want to go to that school. Be prepared with your financial documents. Who's going to be responsible for your tuition and your living expenses? If you have a scholarship, talk about. Sometimes the officer doesn't see that on the I-20 if you get a scholarship. Have your parents, if your parents are paying for you, bring their bank statements, offer the bank statements to the officer, and have a plan. This is the main thing the officer, and this goes back to ties. I would always say to my applicants, tell me, what do you plan to do when you graduate? What's your plans? So have a plan. Plans change, but the officer wants to know you've thought this through. And I'm sure Lisa might have some things to add to that, but that's the main things that I target when I'm looking at the F-1 students.
Yeah. Wow, Caroline, you've got the ball rolling on how to overcome 214B here, but just to back us up a little bit, I mean, I kind of think of 3 buckets for 3 different kinds of refusals that one could get at a student visa interview. The first is 221G. And 221G is technically a refusal, but the easiest way to think of it is as a temporary refusal, meaning the officer's just not ready to make a decision in your case. You can get a 221G for a reason as simple as, oh, you know, I think you're good to go, but, you know, you're missing your updated I-20, or you're good to go, but you need a better passport picture. So your 221G until I get that additional information, and then I can approve your visa. 2 reasons as complicated as national security risks. And, you know, I think we might touch on this a little bit later if we talk about like social media screening and things like that. But, you know, that a 221G is a blanket kind of temporary refusal because the officer is not ready to make a decision yet. So if you get a 221G, just know that that's what that is. And unless the officer tells you why you were 221G, you might want to consider contacting Argo Visa to get an educated guess as to why you're 221G and how to respond to any inquiries from, you know, the post, the embassy, or the consulate on what you can do to overcome that hesitation or that officer's doubts. And that's kind of the first category of refusal. The second category of refusal would be a hard ineligibility, which is something that an officer doesn't necessarily have a lot of discretion regarding. So this would be like if you've committed a crime, if you have overstays in the US, if you've misrepresented yourself in the past and have a bar because of that. These are hard ineligibilities, meaning something very specific the officer can point to and cite a section of law and refuse you for. And if that happens, then you have to look into whether or not you're eligible for a waiver for that ineligibility, or if you want to fight the ineligibility. And that becomes quite a complicated path for people who have been found ineligible in this category of refusal. Luckily, however, as Caroline alluded to, the vast majority of students who get refused are refused under 214B. And the reason why I say luckily is because 214B is a refusal that you can overcome. You can reapply and demonstrate to the officer that even if you didn't overcome 214B last time, you do overcome it this time. Before you go in and try your luck again, though, it's really important to know the requirements of the student visa, know why you were refused so you're not making the same mistakes. And as Caroline says, really focus on why are you studying in the US? Why are you returning home to your home country afterwards, i.e., your plans, like Caroline said? And lastly, how this all makes financial sense for you and whoever is sponsoring you.
I think that one thing both of you a little bit touched on was the plans. You both mentioned ties. So we often get questions of when people get that 214B slip, it usually says something about home country ties. I mean, what on earth does that actually mean?
Lisa, would you like me to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. I'll just let you go first every time. How about that?
No, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to say, Lisa, I don't know the answer. Anyway.
Nobody would believe you, Caroline.
So could you ask me the question again, Davis? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what do home country ties really mean? Is there such thing as like, oh, even we get questions, okay, is this count as a tie? Does that count as a tie? Like, is there a checklist that officers are looking at? Okay, they checked off the home country tie. I mean, how should a student visa applicant think about that term?
You know, that's a really good question. Since I've started working with the Argo, which I have concentrated a lot on that because, you know, I've now had to cross to the other side of the window. You know, as Lisa knows, we have to make that little jump across. But with ties, always think, when I work with my clients at Argo, I say to them, when somebody asks you, do you live with your parents? And if you're an older student, do you have your own home? All of this is ties. You know, the officer might ask a succession of questions. Some officers might come out and point blank say, well, you know, and also that's your plans. When I ask somebody, oh, what are you going to do when you graduate? They say, well, I'm going to take my degree, and I hope that when I return to my home country, I plan to gain experience with XYZ company. I always tell them, try and name the company, because that shows that you are going home. So ties is not one specific question. Mm-hmm. From the minute you answer the question, why do you want to study in the United States? You show ties there. You say, you know, I plan to go, for example, I plan to go to California State University. I particularly want to go to do my bachelor's at this school because it meets in with my future plans, my future goals for when I return to my home country. So don't look at ties as one question. Look at ties in every question, because you can show the ties through the questions. So it's just a little bit of different thinking, but I found it that the students I have interviewed that have done that with me have usually gotten pretty much a home run with me.
And I think you raised a good point. So to confirm, the officer is probably not going to ask you, what are your ties, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So I think, you know, it's about all the rest of the questions. What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a matter of policy, right? That visa officers have to assume that anybody who's applying for a student visa is an intending immigrant. So I tell my clients, imagine that thought bubble above the officer's head. You are intending to immigrate to the United States. What can you say to convince the officer that that's not the case? Those are your ties to your home country, right? So whatever reason you wouldn't, you know, immigrate to the US, i.e., live and work permanently in the US, are the things that compel you to return to your home country. And I think economic reasons are usually the strongest ties, because there's just too many examples around the world every day of people who are willing to sacrifice being physically together with their loved ones in order to provide better economic opportunities for their families. So I always start with the economic opportunity. As Caroline says, you know, future plans for working, and being specific and concrete, i.e., naming the company. These are the things, these are the little this is the texture that you can add to your answer that'll make them more credible and more believable to the consular officer. Just always remember, they're assuming when you talk about why you chose this university, when you talk about why you want to pursue a better education in the United States, how hard you've worked to get to where you are, all of that, it doesn't answer the question, well, okay, but why would you return to your home country? And as Davis points out, it's not going to be explicitly asked. So it should be integrated and proactively volunteered in all of your answers.
That makes a lot of sense. So kind of 214B is the refusal type we're mainly talking about now. And as we've talked about, ties are kind of an important component. But are there other reasons an applicant may get 214B aside from ties? We've had people ask, okay, can the officer refuse me because they didn't like my outfit? Or could the officer refuse me because they didn't like my school or my source of funding? Or even small things of, oh, okay, I wrote the date of my last trip to the US on my DS-160. Are those things that count as ties, or are there other components that could lead to a refusal aside from just ties under 214B?
I'm going to let Lisa start this time.
Okay, I would say yes and no. So the first thing to be really clear about is what are the requirements for the student visa, right? First, that you're a credible student, meaning you really primarily are going to the United States to study. Second, will you return to your home country or a country other than, move to a country other than the US after your studies? That's the ties that we're talking about. And then third, does it all make financial sense? Every question an officer asks goes to one of these three requirements. Because if it doesn't go to one of these three requirements, they're wasting their time. And consular officers or visa officers don't have time to waste. There isn't any one small thing that you can say or do that would be a total deal breaker. If there was, we would just make that an explicit requirement. Like if you wear shorts, you're going to be refused your visa. We don't even let you into the embassy if you're wearing shorts. Okay. But because there is a chance that somebody who's wearing shorts, even though it's not advised, could still be, a credible student who proves they're returning to their home country and it all makes financial sense, we let them into the embassy. We have the interview. If the US government thought that there was any one thing that you could say or do that would make you ineligible for a visa, if it was like an exam sort of situation where, oh, you got 3 out of 10 questions wrong, we would just have AI do the interviews online. We wouldn't have human beings. So that's why I would say no. But the reason I would say yes is because human beings are subjective. They are subconsciously taking in all of this information, what you're wearing, your posture, how confidently you speak, to determine if you're credible, if you're authentic, if they can believe what you're saying. And little things do make a difference when you're trying to communicate your qualifications in a visa interview. That's why during our Argo visa consultations, we focus not just on the substance of the answers. You can write out the most beautiful, perfect answers to all the visa questions, but also delivery, because if you're not delivering those answers in a persuasive manner, it's not going to matter that you have the perfect scripted answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anything else to add, Caroline, on that one?
I think I'm going to leave that unmute button alone. I'm just, guys, there. I seem to be very challenged with it today. No, I think Lisa's, answered that beautifully. I did smile when Lisa was talking about the shorts and going, I always tell my clients at Argo, I said, if you've got a mom or a sister, maybe not dad and brother, just say to them, would you believe me if I'm dressed this way, would you believe me I was a credible student? They're usually really good at being able to tell you how you look. But Lisa is correct. It's what you show at the window. It's the confidence you show, the eye contact, and it's how you deliver your answers naturally. You don't want to sound scripted because officers are like, whoa, the antennas go up. We can tell scripted on the first or second sentence. And that is why when we work with the clients, we keep this a conversation, a natural conversation. You can smile. I tell my clients, just keep watching the officer. Even if they're turned sideways and you're looking at their ear, they're still listening to you. So be very concise. If you don't understand what the officer asks you, I always encourage my clients, say, excuse me, officer, I didn't quite catch the question. Can you repeat it? Because the worst thing is you answering what you think the officer asked you. And then that can usually, upend an interview. But that's all I have to add to Lisa. I think she did a great job of that.
Awesome. I would love to focus more on one thing you said, Lisa, which was about, if it was a requirement of the visa, they would just make it part of the requirement. We get a lot of questions about that. Okay, someone will say, if I have a sister in the US, does that mean I get refused? Someone asked, okay, if I have a loan of this percent, does that mean that I can't get the visa? And it's really not as simple as that. And I think that Caroline and Lisa have both highlighted how important the interview itself is in articulating the nuance of your case. Because if certain elements were just a requirement, or they meant a definite yes or no, then they would make it a requirement. So sometimes that can even be an advantage for you. And what we really help you with at Argo, where if something in your case you may see as a negative or could be a hurdle for you, you can really explain that to the officer with some great advice from Argo, and also kind of go through your highlights. So, Lisa, you mentioned at the beginning about the different types of refusals and why 214B is good, because compared to other options, I guess, you can just reapply. If you get 214B, what do you guys generally recommend for applicants to reapply immediately? Should they wait? What should applicants keep in mind if they receive 214B on their path forward after getting 214B?
It depends, right? It totally depends. It depends on why you were refused. So that's step number one, is try to identify why you were refused. We start all of our consultations for people who've previously been refused by going through what happened in your previous interview. And I always say to my clients, like, I don't need to know what the officer asked you. I know what the officer asked you. We all ask those questions, thousands of times. What I need to know is, what did you say in answer to those questions? So let's go step by step. Tell me what happened in your visa interview. And the reason we go through that process, as traumatic as it can be for some of our clients to relive their visa refusal, is so that we can identify what is the reason or reasons that person in particular was refused. Then we learn more about the client to see what we can come up with in terms of an approach or a strategy to overcome those reasons for refusal. So that way, at a minimum, I mean, nobody can guarantee that you're going to be issued your visa in a second visa interview, but at a minimum, we can say you're not making the same mistake again. Because I think the risk is, if you just go in without knowing why you were refused, or being wrong about why you were refused. And by the way, a lot of people misidentify why they were refused, and they go in and they make the same mistake, or they make their previous mistake even worse, and they get refused again. They're stacking up refusals, and they're making it harder and harder for any future visa officer to say yes to them for any type of visa, because now they have to say, well, you know what, I think my judgment is better than these previous visa officers who've said no to you. So it does become exponentially more difficult to be approved a visa once you've been refused. Really important to know why you were refused, and think about what you can say or do to make sure you're not refused for that same reason again.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I mean, Caroline, what do you think? Should an applicant immediately reapply? What should they do if they just received a refusal?
Well, I ditto everything Lisa says, because, she did it really well. But I'm going to add a couple of other things to this. We often get asked, I know Lisa does, when we're working with clients, we often get asked, well, I didn't show strong enough ties. I think that's why I was refused. And I say to my clients, you don't know why you were refused. You really don't know. There could be so many reasons you were refused. And the main thing is, if you go back straight away, you're going to be asked the question, oh, I see you applied for a visa in March and it's a month later, now April. What's the difference when you previously applied? Because the officer is going to want to know that. So in that instance, sometimes I will recommend to my clients, maybe you should look at the next semester. And in that period of time, get some experience. If your English needs some help, do some communication courses. If you can volunteer, if it's related to, say you're going for a certain degree and there's volunteer opportunities, if you can do internships, even for a short period of time, you can say to the officer, well, officer, since my previous refusal, I have, taken some courses in XYZ. I've done an internship with somebody. So that all helps, when you can show a little bit of difference, from when the last time you did the interview. But, the main thing is, I find this very entertaining, having been on the windows and everybody, I interviewed for 16 years of my career. I stayed on the windows even when I became a manager because I wanted to hear what my officers were hearing. I wanted to learn the demographics. So I never stopped interviewing. Actually, it was the favorite thing I ever did. The management part I could have left alone. They should have left me interviewing. But the days of the one word answer is gone. The days of half a sentence answer is gone. I would say to maybe Lisa's going to be my applicant right now. I'd say to Lisa, what's the purpose of your visit to the United States?
A study.
Okay. I'm already thinking, okay. There's the first. Lisa knew exactly. We didn't even practice, guys. I promise you that. Lisa can read my mind. But Lisa knows exactly where I'm going. Those days are over. You can't just say that. Because remember, it's not up to the visa officer to find a way to give you a visa. That's not the job we're in. And if we have 2 to 3 minutes to interview you, we want information. Lisa's going to be on the hook in a minute again. Sorry, Lisa, I'll put you on the hook again in a second. But they want to know why you want to study, why you're going there. The first question you answer sets the tone of the rest of your interview. I cannot stress that enough. So, Lisa, let's have the perfect answer. Tell me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this to you. So, tell me, why do you want to study at California State University?
Well, I'm currently in a gap year doing an internship at Microsoft where I've learned a lot about what kind of role it is that I want at a multinational country or multinational company here in my home country. In order to achieve that goal, however, I need a bachelor's degree in computer science, preferably from a university in the United States, because that's what multinational companies here in my country really value. And so when I looked at the top 5 universities in California that offer computer science degree programs, this one was the most affordable and also offered me the specific kinds of classes that I was looking for.
Guys, you see the difference there. I can't stress this enough. Clients say to me, well, I look at the blogs and they say, don't give any information, say as little as possible. Those days are gone. If you want your visas, you be ready to show why you are credible and you want that visa. Just remember, you have to prove to the officer that you are a credible student, adequate financial resources, and the ties and a plan to your home country. Lisa, you were a wonderful guinea pig there. So thank you.
I hope you improve my visa, Caroline.
You had me because you had me and I was listening to you. I'm not going to listen to study. I'm already forming an opinion on study. But I really was listening to you. And, that's when I would probably, within the next 2 or 3 questions, because you showed me everything in that answer, I would probably be approving the visa in 2 to 3 questions. Clients say to us, well, they only asked me 2 questions and refused me. Lisa and I know exactly, as soon as we listened to how you answered, we know where that has probably been the reason you were refused. So I'm sorry, Davis, I went on too much.
No, you didn't. And I think you brought up a really good part, which is about discussing what's changed since your last interview, which is what, an officer may explicitly ask you. And if they don't ask you, they're definitely thinking it. So Lisa, what do you think about this topic on how an applicant should discuss what's changed at their next interview?
Well, it depends on if anything has changed, right? So if you take Caroline's advice, which is really solid advice, which is become a better visa applicant before you reapply, then you can point out the things that you've done to become a better visa applicant. Okay, the last time I applied, I was straight out of school. Now I've taken a gap year. I've had some work experience. I've been able to refine what it is I really need out of my education. Today, I'm here to explain, why I think it's best that I have that education at, the University of Washington, for example. So that's one route. But if you feel like you are a solid visa applicant now, because the truth of the matter is, many qualified visa applicants get refused, right? Because they just didn't know how to communicate their qualifications at the visa interview. If you feel you are in that category, a qualified student, visa applicant who just failed to communicate their qualifications, then I think you can reapply right away. And in that case, what you do is present new information. You can't present new circumstances or change circumstances because, as Caroline rightly pointed out, nothing would have substantially changed within a month. But you can present new information. Say, you know what, last time my first visa interview, I didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't tell the visa officer that. And then you enumerate your qualifications, or basically kind of what you would say in answer to the first question if it was your first visa interview. So what I wouldn't do is change things on my application randomly in the hopes that that presents a change of circumstances. Changing who your sponsor is, changing your school just for the sake of changing your school. These are ways that people try to game the system that visa officers see right through. Now, if you want to change your school because you've been admitted to a better school, or now you've been admitted to a program where you get a partial scholarship, that makes sense. Make those changes. Do what's best for you, because generally when you do what's best for you, it makes sense to the visa officer when you explain it in your visa interview. It's when you try to do things because you're putting the visa approval before your education that the officer will start to question your motives.
Yeah, that's really insightful. So something that kind of both Lisa and Caroline have touched on in their various answers over the last couple of minutes is it depends. Like, the personal situation really does matter greatly and can vary. And I think, Lisa, you made a really good point. Just making changes is not a good plan. We get a lot of questions of people coming to us saying, okay, I got refused. Should I change my university? And it's always just wait, talk to one of our officers and kind of make a plan. Caroline, did you have anything else to add about this topic before we go on to the next one? Okay, great. So along with changes, one thing I wanted to discuss is about changing your location. Some people say, okay, I got refused in Mumbai, should I go to New Delhi? Or, okay, I got refused in Mumbai, should I go to Vietnam? Just going to an entirely another country. What would be you guys' advice to someone that's considering changing locations after refusal? And also just in general, for people that want to apply outside of their home country, should there be a really long wait time?
I think things have changed a little bit in since the pandemic, and since visa wait times have gotten really long in terms of how visa officers see people applying outside of their home consular district. So not to put you on the spot, Caroline, but because you were at embassies and consulates during the pandemic and afterwards, so perhaps you want to take this one.
Yeah, Lisa's right there, that it's changed a lot since COVID. Prior to COVID, just an example, if you had gone to what we call visa hopping, visa shopping, we would look, say, for instance, if you're in Mexico, you lived in Tijuana, but you went to Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Matamoros, and were refused in all three. We saw a lot of that. But fast forward, COVID, wait times, the world went crazy. And when we opened up again after COVID, we had such a long wait time. People were getting appointments where they could. And visa officers, especially when I would work with the officers, I would say, that's not, prior to COVID, that was a big deal, but we have to change our way of thinking now. I mean, if somebody, I often hear from our clients, should I go, I was refused in Dubai, should I go to Abu Dhabi? Well, officers know that there is a wait time issues, but also know that, if there's no wait time in Dubai and you go to Abu Dhabi, the officer's going to ask you possibly, why are you here? Why did you not apply in your home country? So if you've got no wait time, that doesn't swing. So just be, very thoughtful about what you do. But again, I will come back to the fact it doesn't really matter where you are. It's how you present yourself at the interview. That's what's going to be the added factor. But yes, wait times have played and has changed a lot since then.
Great. Thanks so much, Caroline, for sharing your insights there. Another really common question we get about visa refusals, and we had it in one of our webinars earlier this week, but we didn't have a chance to get to it, so I wanted to save it for this session, is about the notes that officers leave between interviews. Sometimes people don't realize that the visa record is permanent and that the officers leave notes. Could you guys touch a little bit more on what that all means for an applicant who's going for a second interview after a refusal, or even a third, fourth, fifth interview?
Lisa, do you want me to start on that one?
Sure. Did you take a lot of notes, Caroline?
Yeah, I like to write. You know, I like to talk, so I like to write too. Well, the first words of advice is you can never really know what the officer wrote. You know, it could be a variety of things, but on an F-1 visa, it's pretty much, you know, we're looking for the same thing. Is it credible student? Do you have the financial resources? Do you have the ties? So, you know, if you didn't, you know, had a bad day, maybe the officer thinks, oh, student doesn't, you know, doesn't show ties to their home country, doesn't present the ties necessary. They could have written that. Student has no knowledge on what degree they are doing. It's a bit harsh, but, you know, I have written that in the past too, and I'm sure Lisa has too. So, you know, you can't concentrate too much on what's happened. That ship has sailed. You have to concentrate on how you respond. Yes, the officers are going to take notes. Yes, you read them. But officers are going to interview on the day of your interview. Officers know things change. And again, when I'm working with clients, I'll say, you know, you now basically could look on the second time that you go, you've got the experience because you've already had the first refusal. So now, you know, I really have to present myself well. But you can't control what the officer wrote. You can only be interviewed for that time. I have issued many, many visas over refusals because I have believed the person in front of me. They have shown me what I need to approve their visa. Lisa, I'll let you continue there.
Yeah, I'm not. It's very wise advice, Caroline, not just for the visa interview, but for life. Focus on what you can control. Water under the bridge is exactly that. You know, I tell my clients to assume that visa officers know everything. And there's no point in trying to hide the ball or trying to guess at what was in the previous officer's notes or what wasn't. I can't explain that the motivation for me anyways, as a visa officer to take good notes was to justify my decision because I'm a little bit competitive. And once I've deemed that somebody's not qualified, I don't really want to see another officer overcome my decision and make a different one. That hurts my pride a little bit. And then likewise, when I approve a visa applicant, I'm also taking good notes to justify the approval so that if there's ever any blowback, I can go back to my notes and point out and say, hey, well, this is what they told me on the day of the interview, and this is how I justify my approval. So visa officers do take notes, and generally those notes are facts about what they're hearing, and then the justification for their conclusion, either approval or refusal. But as Caroline says, doesn't really matter what the previous officer wrote or didn't write. What matters is knowing why you were refused and addressing that head on in your next visa interview in as graceful and convincing of a manner as possible.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice from both of you, especially about what you can't control. And that's a big philosophy with the Argo service as a whole, is there's a lot of things in your case you can't control. Maybe, you know, where you're from, your background, all those things are just the facts of your case. And that's, at Argo, we really help you take the true facts of your case and help you figure out how to best present that to the officer at the window, and using the interview as an opportunity. With the question about the notes, we actually had some follow-up questions. Two people asked the same thing. But did you guys write anything different when you almost approved an applicant? Like they were kind of a borderline case. Thought this was kind of interesting and wanted to hear what you guys think about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay.
So,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
just to clarify, I thought Caroline was going to jump in, so I was pausing there. But
I
yeah,
was trying to
so
find the mute button again.
I think it happens a little less often with student visa applicants, but like with tourist people applying for tourist visas, for example, it's like, hey, seems like a genuine person. Unfortunately, salary's low. He's single, ties, no ties to home country, but could be approvable in the future. So definitely, if we feel like somebody is credible, authentic, genuine, but just kind of is in a life situation that they can't point to a lot of ties at that moment in time, we'll make that note in the system for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing the context. Did you have something to add, Caroline?
No, just I totally agree with Lisa because with the F1s, it's more targeted, but you see it more in the B1, B2s could qualify at a future time, needs more time in job, so those things, yes, we do put that in there because we think somebody is credible. But there's just that little bit that just doesn't pass the litmus test. And I've often put in notes, more time needed in job. So it's more the B1, B2s and those areas, but the F1s are a much more targeted visa and it's a lot to do with performance.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So before we get into the questions, just want to cover one other topic. Just a reminder about the questions before we get into it. We're going to try to answer as many as possible. Please just ask your question once and we'll get through those. But one last question before we get into those. We've talked a lot about what to do if you get refused. What advice would you give someone that's going for their first interview, whether it be F1 or just in general, their very first ever visa interview? What should they know to avoid a visa refusal? What advice would you give them?
Caroline, I think you started this session out by, really starting us down that path. So,
well, number one is breathing is good. Breathe. The window. I sometimes feared for one of my clients turning blue at the window, and I've said it's okay, just breathe. Because it's nerve-wracking. It is so nerve-wracking. There's noise, especially the visa mill places. For instance, I started my career in the Philippines. I could hardly hear the client, let alone the client answer me. So it's be comfortable on the day. It's as silly as the thing is wear comfortable shoes. You're going to be standing in a line if it's a big embassy for a long time. When you get to the window, good morning, good afternoon, it helps you be confident. If you're carrying documents, I started this when I started to work for Argo. If you're carrying documents with you, and you want to show them for an F1, your grades, your original transcripts, your finances, have a little packet and put the packet down and put your hands on the packet. It's sometimes when you're new, it gives you some kind of comfort to know you've got your things. I know that's a silly thing, but any way you can make yourself comfortable. But I always say, don't be humble, be confident. It's two different things. Look the officer in the eye. If you go brain dead, which, I can go brain dead too, when somebody's asking me a question, don't be scared to say, excuse me, officer, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. Could you ask me again? So, you can control your own interview to that point. And it's easy for me and Lisa to say, just be confident. It is nerve-wracking. But always remember, if you're confident in yourself, it's going to transfer to the officer because we notice it right away. I know I do. Mm-hmm. And if you're nervous, we also notice it. And some officers will put you at ease, but you can't guarantee that. I'm sure Lisa will weigh in here too.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to say the best way to avoid refusal is to have a consultation with somebody like Caroline, so that she can, hear what your plans are, hear the reasons why you want to study in the US, and give you those tips and that practice. Those mock interviews are so valuable in the consultation, so that you can practice giving your answer, and Caroline can tell you this is what you did well, or this is what you're missing in your answer. But not everybody can come to us for a consultation, and we get that. That's why we do these free videos and webinars. So I would say, my biggest piece of advice would be to know what the requirements are and know what you're going to say, so that you're not waiting for the question, but you are going to use those questions as a platform to say what you need to say to demonstrate your qualifications. You can stay up all night for days and days, uh, anticipating, creating every possible question under the sun that the visa officer can ask you, because there's not a script, right? That we don't get as visa officers, hey, ask 10 of these 20 questions. No, you can't anticipate every question. You'll drive yourself crazy if you try to do that. But what you can anticipate is what the officer is looking for, and what you can say to alleviate their concerns when you're asked a question that gives you the excuse to do so.
And I'm going to weigh in one more thing. The night before
Yeah.
your interview, don't send yourself crazy. Relax. You've done all you can do, because things get so muddled in your head. Get a good night's sleep and be ready just to give your performance of a lifetime when you get there. But try and relax the night before, because you could be perfect, but you could mess yourself up. Always just chill a little bit and then be ready for your interview the next day.
Yeah, don't focus so much on the substance of the answer that you're so stressed out that you can't deliver that answer in a calm, confident, convincing manner the next day. Yeah, exactly right.
Awesome advice. Okay, so I hope you guys all enjoyed all these insightful thoughts and discussion between Lisa and Caroline. So we'll jump into some questions. For the interest of time, I think the best way to kind of rapid fire through as many as possible, maybe between Lisa and Caroline, we can either alternate, or you guys just pick. If you're drawn, go ahead and start answering. And then if you have something really relevant, you can add on. So the first one I think would love to address is, does a B2 rejection massively impact F1? And just in general, we get this question a lot. How does a B1, B2 refusal impact the F1? What do you think, Caroline?
Lisa, do you want to start and we'll alternate?
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Yeah, Caroline.
Okay,
Lisa,
no, this is a
word salad. Lisa, go ahead.
This is a really, really, really good question. And the answer is yes. How much it impacts depends on how long ago the refusal was, what the reason, again, we're going back to those, kind of primary principles, what the reason for refusal was. I mean, if you were 5 years old and applying with your parents and your parents were refused, it impacts your current student visa application a little bit less. But you have to know why your parents were refused. Is it because they weren't seen as being genuine tourists? Is it because they didn't have a strong socioeconomic status in the home country? And be sure that you're compensating for that in your student visa interview, because there is going to be a bias against you if you've been refused any kind of visa before. So it really depends on the reason. And then you build your strategy there based on the reason.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So, Caroline, what do you think about this? How to deal with a cross question asked by the officer?
Thank you for your question, Pragati. I'm not really understanding it on cross question.
I think maybe a grumpy officer, or a question that feels like a little pointed.
Oh, cross.
Yeah, Caroline, why are consular officers so grumpy anyway? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I've had my days on the window too, but I've tried not to. You can only control yourself. You can't control the officer. On the officer's side, they could be interviewing 150 people in 4 hours. And Lisa can agree with me on this, I'm sure. It is exhausting because you are going constantly. So it's nothing about you. Don't take it personally. It could be, just a really rough day. It could be that officer's manner, but and I actually, funnily enough, get asked this question a lot with my Argo clients. I just say to them, you remain with a smile on your face, answer the questions. If you don't understand the question, just politely ask the officer to repeat the question, but you can't control the officer's, demeanor or how they're feeling. But, a smile has actually taken it a long way with me. When I get a smiling applicant at the window, it smiles at me. That's usually made me feel, that's made my day or something. But, you just remain confident. Don't let it throw you. With Argo, and I do know Lisa does this because I know she's an excellent mock interviewer. I've heard her and I think she's wonderful. Lisa's not paying me, guys. It's okay. I genuinely mean that. I've got a lot of respect for Lisa as an officer. But, you just have to control your own answers. That's the main thing. And don't take it personally. Just give the best answers you can to the question.
Yeah, I love that with don't taking it personally, because that's something you can't control. So I think that's great advice, Caroline. Lisa, what do you think about this? What if someone is applying for an F-1 but has a pending I-130, or for those of you who don't know, if you have any sort of pending immigrant petition?
So this really, really complicates your situation. Again, it's not a requirement that you not have a pending I-130 in order to qualify for a student visa, but it is a requirement that you not be an intending immigrant at the time that you apply for your student visa. So if you have a pending immigrant petition and you're applying for a student visa at the same time, then you have to have a very sophisticated, nuanced, and convincing explanation as to why you're going to return after you complete your studies in the US, despite literally, having on record demonstrated an interest in living permanently in the United States. And it could be something as simple as, well, of course, I'm going to come back because I want to immigrate to the US legally. My immigrant petition is, going to be coming up in about 7 years. In the meantime, I'd like to study in the US so that, when I do immigrate legally and a return for my visa, my immigrant visa interview, that I'm set up so that I can pursue the economic opportunities that the US has to offer once I immigrate. But in the meantime, I'm going to be coming back. This is my plan. This is what I'm going to do.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so Caroline, you kind of mentioned this earlier about how many questions an applicant may get asked. This person says they were only rejected after just one question. What do you think about what an applicant should take away if they've only been asked? How many questions should an applicant expect at the interview?
Aditya, I'll go back to which I previously said, and thank you for your question. That first answer you give sets the tone for the rest of your interview. I don't know how you answered it, but when I with Argo, when I work with my clients, I actually can tell by that first or second question what went wrong based on the answers you've given me. Not always, but pretty much so. My advice to you would be have one of your family members ask you, why do you want to study in the United States? Turn on your cell phone. Everyone's got a cell phone now. Record yourself answering the question. There's no better critic than yourself. And that will tell you a lot on how you answered that question. My guess is that you didn't substantially answer it to the satisfaction of the officer. I wasn't there and I don't know what happened, but I would say your answer wasn't substantive enough regarding your course. But if I was you, I would turn on that recorder and answer the question yourself and listen to your own answer.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. So we're going to try to hit on a few more questions before we wrap up. So Lisa, if the visa officer has heard the name of the university for the first time, are they going to assume that that's a bad university and that the student has immigrant intent?
No, there are many, many universities in the United States, and we haven't heard of all of them. But the officer might Google the university, and if the university is one that isn't, a top tier university, I do think that you as a visa applicant have to do a little more legwork to explain why you're willing to live apart from your family for 4 years, spend, $100,000 for this education, if it's not substantially better than what you could get in your home country, for example. So does university choice matter? Yes, but what matters more is your explanation as to why you chose that university.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And there's been a handful of questions about university. Definitely, if you want to work more on this, how you address this, you should definitely consider working with an Argo officer. We go through that question a lot with applicants and how they articulate and explain their reasoning in a convincing, logical way for the officer. So I think this might be our last question. Caroline, is it possible for an F-1 applicant to get a visa after 6 refusals? What's the best way to present the application or interview to get a visa in the 7th attempt?
That's a lot of refusals. My first question would be, were you going back month after month? Did you, there's a lot to this answer, which is going to be difficult for me to articulate in the short time we have. So I hope somebody who wants to discuss this further will consider reaching out to Argo so that we can really dial down and find out what was going on with the 6 refusals. It could be for so many reasons. And again, I would definitely say if you went month after month after month, if you had 5 refusals in the same year, try and strategically think about what the university or college you want to go to. Give it some time. This is where you need some time to show that you have considered, waited a year, waited 2 years, got experience, gone out in the field. If you want to do computer science, gone and worked for somebody for a year or 2. This is where I would say you need some time. You need some time because 6 refusals is a lot of refusal. It's going to be a lot to overcome. I'm never going to say anything's impossible. I'm just going to say this is going to be difficult. But if you want to be a student and you want to study in the United States, wait a little while, get some experience, try and say to that officer, some people think the experience is, well, I traveled 3 different countries to show I'm an international traveler. That's great because you came back. But I'm more going to want to know, what did you do to overcome those 6 refusals?
Okay, great. And I think that also will be a case we really recommend you working with us at Argo, because the personalized information will matter more and more with the more refusals to make an effective plan and strategy. So we are right at time. Thank you, everybody who joined. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't fully get to, but we went through some of those questions as fast as possible. So if your question didn't get answered, you have a burning question, please email us at hello@argovisa.com. I'll put it in the chat. Also, of course, would highly recommend booking a consultation with either Lisa or Caroline or any of our former officers. We were joined by a few others earlier this week. You can book a consultation on our website at www.argovisa.com. If you have any questions about our service, how it works, send us an email. We respond every day, so we'll be monitoring it and get back to you as soon as possible. Also, tomorrow we will have another session with Rob Adams from Chine Coaching, talking about how to succeed as a student in the U.S. once you arrive. And on Friday, we're actually going to have a former Argo client join us to tell us a little bit more about their experience with Argo, but also their life as an F-1 student, all those things. So we have some more great things planned for you throughout the week. So thanks to everybody who joined us. Thank you so much to Lisa and Caroline who joined us. I think, I was going to share this. We also had this great feedback from somebody saying that they got their F-1 visa after a week ago. So thank you, Erin, for joining us and sharing this feedback. It means the world to us to hear feedback from our clients and to be helping as many students as possible and other visa applicants as possible. So Thanks to everybody for your trust in us. You really are trusting the best team. And I hope Caroline and Lisa really gave you a taste today of how wonderful the Argo team is, how knowledgeable and experienced they are, and that you are in good hands with us. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day and week ahead. And good luck in your student visa application.